I've got a bonus episode for you today, and when I say bonus, I mean we are officially in overflow territory. There is so much Baldoni versus Blake Lively fallout happening right now that I physically cannot fit it into my twice-daily pop culture show, Corevanta. I tried. I sat there staring at my rundown like, okay, maybe we can trim this, maybe we can shave that, and then another document drops, another text thread surfaces, another pre-trial update leaks out, and suddenly the whole thing explodes again. So instead of trying to squeeze a 5-course meal into a paper cup, I figured we carb a load. We sit down, we unpack everything, and we go deep. That's what this is, and before we dive in, I just want to say something quickly from the heart. The last year on this channel has been unreal. Truly unreal. Last year we doubled. This year it feels like we strapped a rocket to the roof and just said, let's see what happens. The growth has been wild, the engagement has been wild, and yeah, the drama has been wild too. But I feel incredibly grateful. There are always going to be critics. There are always going to be people who misunderstand what you're doing or why you're doing it. But the support? The comments? The likes? The people who say, Lars Harry, keep going? It means more than you know. So before we get into legal chaos and text message desperation and PR panic, just know I don't take any of this for granted, alright? Let's get into it. Today I'm going to walk you through a compilation of text messages sent by Justin Baldoni to members of his team, messages that, when you read them in sequence, paint a picture of someone who saw the storm coming long before the first thunderclap hit publicly. These texts date back nearly 2 years. This wasn't a last-minute scramble. This wasn't some overnight PR war. This was a slow burn. And at the center of it all? Instagram unfollows, blocked numbers, and a creeping realization that something bigger was brewing behind the scenes. We now know that at some point Ryan Reynolds blocked Baldoni. Not only blocked him, but reportedly blocked members of his team as well. And if you think that sounds small or petty, you don't understand how Hollywood operates. In normal life, someone blocking you is awkward. In Hollywood, it's strategic. It's signaling. It's drawing a line in the sand. One of the earliest texts from Baldoni reads like someone trying to stay calm while sensing the ground shift beneath his feet. He tells his team that Ryan has blocked him. He acknowledges it feels petty. He admits it stung. But what stands out is not anger, it's foresight. He says they should have a plan in case Blake does the same when the movie comes out. He admits there's fear. He admits it hurts. But he also says planning makes him feel more at ease. That's not the tone of someone launching a smear campaign. That's the tone of someone bracing for impact. Now let's pause here for a second, because context matters. In entertainment, perception is currency. Being excluded is not just emotional, it's professional. When someone blocks you publicly, when they unfollow you, when they leave you out of promo cycles, it creates a narrative vacuum. And the internet hates a vacuum. The internet fills it instantly. His team's response in those messages is telling. They talk about documenting everything that happened on set. They talk about allies. They talk about timelines. They talk about being prepared if claims need to be shut down. Notice what they're not saying. They're not saying, let's attack. They're saying, let's be ready. That distinction matters. Around the same time, there are internal conversations involving Sony. Blake reportedly wanted to gather cast members to shoot promotional content for the film. On paper, that sounds harmless. Actors promote their films all the time. But the catch? Baldoni, the director, was being left out. That's where things start to feel less accidental and more coordinated. Sony representatives were apparently informed that if official content was being produced for the film, Baldoni needed to be included. Because fans would notice if he wasn't. And they were right. Fans always notice, but here's the wild part. According to internal messages, Ryan Reynolds' company, Maximum Effort, was heavily involved in producing promotional content. Sony itself reportedly had minimal involvement in that specific content rollout. Think about that for a moment. A major studio project, and the marketing machine is being influenced, if not led, by the spouse of one of the stars. That's not standard practice. That's power consolidation now. I work in entertainment. Different lane, different level, but I understand the ecosystem. There is always a fear of exclusion. There is always a fear of being cut out. You see it when actors don't get invited to premieres. You see it when comedians aren't booked on certain lineups. You see it when a cast posts a group photo and one person is missing. It sends a message, whether intentional or not. Imagine creating a sandbox. You build it. You invite people into it. And then suddenly someone else is standing at the gate telling you that you can't play in it anymore. That's what this starts to feel like from Baldoni's side. There are more texts. Messages about ensuring he's included in content. Messages about not leaning too heavily on his health as an excuse for absence. Messages about waiting for clarity before acting. It reads less like a war strategy and more like crisis containment. Meanwhile, the internet begins noticing something strange. Social media users start asking why Baldoni isn't doing press. Why he's not being tagged. Why Blake doesn't follow him. Why he's absent from group appearances. And this is where things spiral, because once online communities sense a pattern, they investigate. They screenshot. They cross-reference. They check who unfollowed whom and when. It becomes digital detective work. Not bots. Not paid trolls. Regular people with Wi-Fi and curiosity. And let me say this clearly, the early questions were not pro-Baldoni. They weren't fan campaigns. They were confusion. Why isn't the director promoting his own movie? That's not a hostile question. That's logical. Instead of letting him attend the premiere and smile for cameras, there were reportedly internal pushes suggesting he shouldn't go. The author, Colleen Hoover, in private messages appears conflicted but leaning toward supporting Blake's position. She talks about anxiety. She talks about hurt feelings. She talks about possibly not attending if he's there, and here's where nuance gets lost. If Blake experienced genuine harassment, that changes everything. Full stop. But what's publicly available so far? It doesn't match the scale of the professional exile that followed. That's where public confusion lives. Not in hatred. In mismatch. We've all seen real Hollywood predators exposed. We've seen patterns. We've seen corroboration. We've seen receipts. In those cases, the industry shifts collectively. Here, the evidence the public has seen is mostly silence, and social media moves, and silence, in the age of the internet, breeds speculation. There are texts from team members noting Instagram comments gaining traction. 1 hour after Blake posts something, top comments question Baldoni's absence. They monitor like counts. They worry about algorithm boosts. They discuss shutting down speculation. That's not villain behavior. That's PR in survival mode. Another message bluntly states that Blake has flipped and is pushing for Baldoni not to attend the premiere. That she's influencing other actors. That it's brutal and bad for the movie. If that's accurate, that's not damage control, that's escalation. And here's the thing about escalation: once you try to strong-arm a situation in the age of social media, you lose control of it. Because you can coordinate a cast. You can coordinate PR statements. You cannot coordinate millions of independent observers online. When unfollows start stacking, one actor, then another, it becomes a breadcrumb trail. People connect dots. They build timelines. They form theories. Corporations spend millions trying to manufacture viral moments. This wasn't manufactured. This was organic curiosity catching fire. And Baldoni's team? They're inside the building while the smoke alarms are going off. They talk about not engaging publicly. They talk about letting speculation die down. They talk about avoiding feeding the narrative. Sometimes that works. Sometimes silence starves a story, but sometimes silence looks like guilt, and that's the tightrope they were walking. There's also commentary from insiders suggesting this could have been avoided if Blake had simply allowed him to attend the premiere and maintain appearances. Protect the project. Protect the optics. Handle internal conflict quietly. Instead, it became visible, and once something becomes visible, it becomes permanent. Here's the uncomfortable reality: in Hollywood, power isn't just about talent. It's about leverage. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are a power couple with business equity, brand control, and enormous influence. Baldoni is successful, yes, but he doesn't operate with the same combined machinery. When machinery moves, smaller gears get crushed. Now, to be fair, this is still unfolding. There was a recent settlement conference. It reportedly didn't result in resolution. That doesn't mean it won't eventually. Lawsuits are marathons, not sprints. But the fact that negotiations didn't immediately fix this tells you how entrenched both sides are. What we're watching isn't just a legal battle. It's a reputational chess match, and the most fascinating part? Baldoni seemed to sense it before anyone else publicly did when he texted that Ryan blocking him felt petty but scary, that there was fear but he was working through it daily, that wasn't paranoia. That was pattern recognition. When he asked his team to have documentation ready, that wasn't aggression. That was preparation. The question now isn't just who's right or wrong. It's whether this could have been handled without detonating the entire promotional cycle of a major film, because once you fracture a cast publicly, you can't fracture it quietly, and that's where we are. This is only half of it. This is Lars Harry, this is Corevanta, and we're just getting started. Now let's pick up exactly where this whole thing shifts from uncomfortable tension to full-blown reputational warfare, because up until this point, you could still argue this was just messy Hollywood politics. Hurt feelings, ego clashes, creative control disputes. Those things happen all the time. They're ugly, but they're normal. What makes this different is how coordinated the social distancing became and how publicly visible it was. At the premiere situation is where everything crystallizes. According to the internal communication circulating, there was active discussion about whether Justin Baldoni should attend the premiere of the very film he directed. Let that sink in. A director being potentially excluded from his own movie's premiere is not standard industry behavior. That's not creative differences. That's exile, and the reasoning being floated internally? That Blake had flipped after something Baldoni said in a documentary regarding a coffee table book. That she was now pushing Sony to prevent him from attending. That the author had aligned with her. That other actors were being influenced. One message flat out says she had been brilliantly choreographing this for a while. Now whether you believe that phrasing is emotionally charged or factually precise is up to you. But it tells you how his team perceived what was happening. They didn't see chaos. They saw orchestration. There's also something psychologically fascinating here. In high-stakes creative projects, there's often a battle over narrative ownership. Who gets credit? Who gets legacy? Who gets to stand at the center of the story when it's successful? If you believe Blake contributed massively to shaping the film, then from her perspective she may have felt ownership. If you believe Baldoni acquired the rights, shepherded the project, and built it from the ground up, then from his perspective the ownership was already defined. Contractual. That clash, emotional ownership versus contractual ownership, is combustible, and when emotions override optics, decisions get made that might feel powerful in the moment but backfire publicly. Because here's what happened next: the internet noticed everything. Comments began appearing under Blake's posts asking why Baldoni wasn't in press interviews, why he wasn't tagged, why he wasn't standing beside the cast. These weren't angry mobs. They were observers asking logical questions, and the internal response? Monitor. Flag. Shut down. Do not engage. They specifically emphasized not feeding the speculation. On paper, that's textbook crisis PR. Don't amplify rumors. Don't dignify noise. Let it burn out. But here's the flaw in that logic. In 2026, silence doesn't suffocate digital curiosity. It fuels it. The more visible the unfollowing became, the more it turned into a breadcrumb trail. One actor unfollows. Then another. Then the author. Then supportive accounts shift tone. It becomes pattern recognition for online communities, and I want to make something very clear here. When people online connect dots, it's not always malicious. It's cultural instinct. We live in an era where audiences feel participatory in celebrity narratives. They don't just consume stories, they analyze them. So when Baldoni disappears from promo, when unfollows stack up, when premiere attendance becomes questionable, people don't shrug. They investigate. There's also a moment in the internal messages where they flag a minor media outlet running with the speculation. They talk about suggested language to shut this down. That phrase is important. It's not about correcting misinformation. It's about containment, but here's the irony: the speculation was rooted in visible actions. The unfollows weren't rumors. The absence wasn't imaginary. So you're trying to contain something that audiences can literally see with their own eyes. That's like trying to gaslight the algorithm. Now let's zoom out. Why does this matter beyond gossip? Because what we're witnessing is a collision between power structures. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are not just actors. They are brand ecosystems. They have ownership stakes, marketing infrastructure, PR influence, and social leverage that extends beyond a single film. When maximum effort becomes involved in promotional material, that's not casual support. That's strategic integration. Sony reportedly had limited involvement in some of the promo content being created. That's unusual. Studios typically guard marketing control tightly. If external machinery is steering that wheel, that suggests significant influence, influence creates imbalance, and imbalance creates resentment, or at least fear, from the side that feels outnumbered. Baldoni's early texts read like someone trying to stay calm while realizing the power dynamics are shifting against him. He talks about fear. He talks about being hurt. He talks about needing a plan. That's not bravado. That's vulnerability, and I think this is where the public conversation often loses nuance. It becomes Team Blake versus Team Baldoni. But the deeper issue is systemic. What happens when celebrity power begins to override professional structure? If a star can effectively isolate a director from his own film's promotional cycle, what precedent does that set? If that isolation is justified by serious misconduct, then the public needs clarity. If it's rooted in personal or creative conflict, then the optics become damaging, and that's the vacuum we're still sitting in. Another layer to this is the harassment allegation context. The bar for industry exile has rightfully shifted in recent years. We've seen genuine predators removed from power. We've seen systemic abuse exposed. But with that progress comes responsibility. The threshold for reputational annihilation needs credible substantiation. Publicly, what has been shown so far? Very little beyond claims and counterclaims. That's why confusion persists. It's also why settlement negotiations haven't immediately resolved this. If one side feels morally justified and the other feels professionally targeted, compromise becomes emotionally difficult. And make no mistake, lawsuits of this magnitude are rarely just about money. They're about narrative control. About future career viability. About who history sides with. There's also something else happening here that fascinates me: the audience alignment shift. Early on, the questions were neutral. Over time, as more internal texts surfaced, more people began to view Baldoni less as a villain and more as someone who saw the storm coming. That shift didn't happen because of bots. It happened because of documented communication showing preparation rather than attack. People respond to perceived authenticity. They respond to vulnerability. When someone says, "There's fear in me," that humanizes them. Contrast that with coordinated unfollowing and premiere exclusion, and optics start tilting. Now, is that the full story? Of course not. There are likely layers we haven't seen. But in the court of public opinion, optics often outweigh nuance, and the premiere, the symbolic culmination of a film's journey, became the battleground. There were messages suggesting it would be bad for the movie, bad for everyone involved, if he were excluded. Because premieres are not just parties. They are unity theatre. They are visual declarations that a project survived production and stands intact. If the director is in the basement, metaphorically or literally, that image lingers. And here's something that doesn't get discussed enough: movies are collaborative. They are ecosystems of ego, talent, compromise, and stress. On almost every set, someone hates someone else by the end. But traditionally, everyone shows up, smiles, protects the product, and handles grievances later. That didn't happen here. Instead, the grievances bled into the rollout. From a strategic standpoint, that's risky. Because once the audience senses division, the story stops being about the film and starts being about the feud, and that's exactly what happened. We're no longer discussing themes, performances, cinematography. We're dissecting text threads, Instagram activity, and PR containment strategies. That's a narrative hijack. Now let's address the settlement conference briefly. Reports indicate it didn't lead to resolution. That suggests entrenched positions. It suggests neither side feels incentivized to blink first, but prolonged litigation carries its own cost. Financially, yes. Reputationally, absolutely. Every new filing reopens wounds. Every leak reignites commentary, and in the middle of it all sits the original creative work, almost forgotten. What fascinates me most is that 2 years ago, Baldoni appeared to anticipate this. The ticking time bomb language isn't dramatic in hindsight. It's accurate. He sensed isolation before isolation became public spectacle when Ryan blocked him. That wasn't just social media pettiness. That was symbolic separation. And symbols matter in Hollywood. Let me also say this, there is a difference between protecting yourself and punishing someone. Baldoni's early messages read like protection planning. If there's evidence that contradicts that, the public hasn't seen it yet. On the flip side, if Blake experienced conduct that made collaboration impossible, she has every right to draw boundaries. The issue is clarity. Ambiguity fuels polarization, and polarization fuels content cycles like this, which brings us to now. We are watching a case study in modern celebrity conflict management. Social media amplifies. PR strategizes. Audiences investigate. Legal teams posture. And the truth, whatever its full shape is, unfolds slowly. But one thing is certain, this could have remained a quiet industry dispute. It didn't. It became cultural because when you combine power couples, beloved authors, studio involvement, harassment claims, unfollowing cascades, and premiere politics, you don't get silence. You get spectacle, and spectacle is hard to contain. As this continues, the real question isn't just who wins legally. It's who retains long-term credibility. Hollywood has a short memory but a long archive. Screenshots don't disappear. Narratives calcify. So whether this ends in settlement, trial, or mutual retreat, the reputational imprint is already there for Baldoni. The imprint is resilience mixed with perceived vulnerability for Blake. It's assertive boundary setting mixed with power consolidation optics for the industry. It's another reminder that internal conflict in the age of Instagram is never truly internal. And for us watching? It's a masterclass in how quickly perception can outrun intention. This is Lars Harry, this is Corevanta, and as this case unfolds, you already know, we'll be here breaking it down, twice a day, every day.